Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Mitchell C. Beinhaker Esquire is here, and Mitchell is a business lawyer and estate attorney who runs a solo legal and consulting practice representing business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals. Mitchell has handled business development, marketing, firm management, business transactional work for clients of the firm, and he has experience with corporate governance, commercial transactions, real estate, risk analysis. He is the accidental entrepreneur, and he's the author of 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, a small business owner's guide to staying out of court. So, Mitchell, glad to be speaking with you.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you too. And so we dumped out a lot of cool, like some scary and some exciting attributes about you. But what are you all about? What's your current focus and your passion?
I've been a small business attorney probably for 32 years now. I work with entrepreneurs and startups doing most of their transactional stuff, setting up their companies, helping them acquire other companies, handling their governance, which is really their corporate documents, things like their operating agreements or their articles of incorporation, or all the stuff that probably most business owners either don't have or don't realize that they have. So, all that kind of stuff. And then I do handle a lot of estates and trust work in New Jersey and some in New York for clients and family-owned businesses and, things like that. Like my real estate work is really for business owners. It all kind of centers around the small business owner. And then the podcast you mentioned, I've been doing for 5.5 years. It's just a passion project trying to put out the good word to help small business owners make a little bit better decisions, I think.
Well, wonderful. And we can definitely use help with that. And so you're a multifaceted person, you do all these things. And why entrepreneurs, small business owners in particular? Because you hear about how it's like they're like the magic factor in the economy, right? There's huge businesses and kind of they're taken care of, but these kind of small, scrappy startups that are keeping the families alive and kind of doing the innovation. That's where the exciting part is. But like, what do you think about all that? Like, why the deliberate choice to help out these entrepreneurs, small business owners?
Well, when I started in the business, I was working in the insurance industry with a lot of financial professionals. My father, for most of his career, was in life insurance and that kind of financial planning, if you think about it. So a lot of it is like business succession planning, estate planning, non-qualified deferred compensation for executives. So I was always working with, business owners all the time. I wouldn't say it's a shift, but if you look at what's happened in the last 4 years with the pandemic, I mean, everybody and their grandmother started up a small business. So our economy is just riddled with, all these small business owners that are trying to make it on their own, that didn't want to work with big corporations anymore. So I kind of straddle the line. Small business owners need a lot of help, don't have a lot of money. The bigger businesses, and we're talking, 2 to 5 years, maybe $5 to $15 million in revenue. Those can pay their bills, and they're getting there. So I have a passion project to try and get people over the hump to the 2 to 5 year range and beyond 5 years, because we know a lot of businesses don't continue, at beyond 5 years, or they struggle for a long time. But yeah, I've always kind of worked in that space, and the space has just kind of changed as I have continued to work with people. Things have gotten more online. It's easier to set up companies now. It's easier to file things. It's just kind of evolved over time.
I think you're so right about how this weird change has occurred, right? Like I've been full time for 15 years, and I was a weirdo being someone who like kind of like quit a 9 to 5 and did kind of like a solopreneur, and then that over time got like a few employees. But there was always well, why are you doing that? Why don't you just like stick it out, so to speak, and do the 9 to 5 and like build up your nest egg, and then you can invest and you can kind of skip over this whole business owner thing. But then even at the time, I was thinking like, well, you don't really have job security anyway, right? Like your company might downsize, you might get fired, something else might happen. And so it's like people are kind of living in this illusion that like, well, I can't take the risk of going into the entrepreneurship. And it's like, well, you're kind of taking the risk at your job anyway, and you might run out of time and then be like too old or have too many responsibilities to start this business. But then pandemic, as you said, it kind of like woke a lot of us up and said like, hey, that job that you thought was safe turns out it's not. But then with pandemic and the high speed internet and the video and the technology, it's like, well, now it's not that as difficult as it was or
Right.
as slow as it was to get all this kind of businessy stuff figured out. And so when people jump into entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
like, is there anything that drives you crazy about it? Like, does anyone go wrong with it? Do they like not set up their business entity or their bank accounts, or do they not, are their numbers a mess? Like, what is kind of a big problem you see with these small business owners?
Yeah, all of those things. I mean, the business, and that's why I started the podcast, because I constantly deal with people that come to me and they have problems, and some of the problems are because they didn't, write a basic business plan, know their numbers, pay attention to their marketplace, pay attention to their customers, whatever it is. A lot of people think like they have a great idea or a product, and they go out and they have some money, maybe from when they got severance or whatever, and they go and they buy this product or they have this thing created, and boom, they're off and running, and they haven't done any of the due diligence or any of the work that you have to do to figure out whether it's even a good business idea. Like, just because you think it's a good idea doesn't mean maybe it should be a business, or maybe nobody else is interested in it. So I constantly find unprepared entrepreneurs. And it's not that people can't do what they need to do to be more successful or to increase their chances of success. I'm not going to guarantee it, certainly. There's nobody can do that, right? But if you want to increase your chances of being successful, you have to do the things that successful people do. And it's not like you don't need a physics degree. You don't have to go work for NASA to learn how to run a business. The information's out there. You can listen to podcasts, you can read books, you can go to seminars, you can find coaches. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to learn properly how to do things the right way. And, if I filled a room with I don't know, 300 some odd people that I've interviewed over the last 5 years, I could split it right down the middle and say, here are the, maybe not down the middle, but here are the people that are successful. And they have similar characteristics, similar things that they do to be successful. And these other people, maybe it is 80-20. These other people are struggling because they don't do the other things that they're supposed to do. They don't want to pay attention to their numbers, which is probably the biggest part of it, right? Really knowing the cost of running your business. I mean, the best business owners that I work with really know their business. They know exactly when their business increases, when they should add more staff or another crew or whatever industry they're in. They know if things shrink down, what they're going to do to be resilient to get through the next pandemic or whatever happens, in society that we're not anticipating. It's the other ones that are, like you said, they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants. They were the ones that thought working for a corporation was secure. It's probably less secure than being on your own, because like you said, the farther you go in your career, the more likely they are to let you go. And then what do you do when you're 55, 60, 65 years old, right? What do you do? I get attorneys that call me now. I'm 57. So I get attorneys call me, hey, do you have any work for me? I said, well, no. I mean, I have to have a book of business. So, and they don't, because they've been working for somebody. So I think, like, if you go back 2 generations, right? Our grandparents, let's say, you work for a corporation, you put the time in, the corporation makes money, takes care of its employees, you get a pension, things like that. And there's loyalty, reasons to stay with the company. That is all gone. And it's been gone for a long time. Like you said, people are just kidding themselves to think that they have more security by staying in a job, just going 9 to 5 until the company has to downsize, or they sell a division, or they have a problem, or there's a scandal or whatever. And then they're laying people off because that's what corporations do. So I think that people, and it is frustrating, can do things the right way. They can take time to learn what you need to do to be successful. And they just don't do it. It's part of our lazy nature as human beings, I think. It's easier to not than to do. Maybe they're afraid you're going to fail. So if you don't do it, then you got all the reasons that you can say, well, it didn't work because, these people didn't buy whatever. Yeah, but you didn't do any marketing. You didn't do any advertising. You didn't research the product. You didn't know your finances. You didn't, whatever. That's
an interesting wake up call, right? That your business is for sure an expression of yourself, but
right.
there are things that are necessary, right? Like you keep your car if you want to drive a car, and you say, I've decided that changing my oil, it just doesn't interest me, and I'll drive my car, and that's just the one thing that I'll neglect. Well, then look at what the end result will be. If you
Right.
say, well, I don't want to work on my marriage, don't want to listen to my partner, I want to get a college degree, but I don't want to go to class, take your pick. You can say, well, hey, I can make this emotional decision that I don't want to do this one thing, and then you wonder why you're missing one ingredient in the recipe and it doesn't come out the way that you want. And so that's a very helpful insight that
Very,
we've all heard that like learning is good, and that especially if you're a self-employed entrepreneur, business owner, you need to be learning all the time. But
right.
there's not, I think, enough spoken about how there's like the list of like all the things that you could learn in your business, and
Yeah.
then there's a list of what excites you, and that might be something that you emotionally go to. But then there's the other list of what the successful people have learned and what they've done, which, as you say, includes paying attention to things and doing your due diligence and being prepared and like knowing your numbers. And I found that to be very helpful. And I'm always looking to tap into like a numbers guy mindset, right? Like when I talk to my accountant and he says like, well, put this percentage into that. Or I talked to a guy last month that said every week look at your profit. Don't just look at the money coming in. Like look at this on like a weekly basis. And it kind of reminds me how like I used to butt heads with people. Like if I work with them and I'd say like, hey, can we talk about how the numbers are going this month? Or I don't like how this is looking. And I would kind of get laughed at or made fun of, like if someone didn't want to even think about that or look at that or label my paying attention as like over stressing. And so like, what do you say about that? If there is some of these entrepreneurs that say like, oh, I want to have fun, I don't want to put myself through this stress, and there's someone like me who says like, well, I'm not stressed, but I want to pay attention to that. How do we force ourselves to pay attention, and how do we make sure that we like develop this sort of number looking at the numbers habit?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that people don't realize the kind of stress they're going to go through if they neglect to do the things they need to do that they're unwilling to do, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs were like right brain, where that's the creative side. Nobody wants to do the left brain stuff. So if you start, and this is one of the things that my book focuses on, right? A lot of it is about putting things in writing, being deliberate about what you do. So if you start by creating some sort of a basic business plan, even if the business is already operating, but sketch out things and focus on, let's start with 4 major areas. If you look at a typical business plan template, it's probably 10 to 12, different sections. But let's focus on 4 of them, right? So there's your product and service, whatever that is, right? How it is, how you manufacture, what you do, how you offer your service, whatever. Then there's the personnel side of the business, right? And don't kid yourself to think that you can do everything yourself. There's probably skills that you don't have, you can get, or there's things that you're doing that is, $20 an hour work, and you should be doing the $200 an hour work, And if some of it can be done virtual, it's not expensive. You can get VAs to do stuff. I have marketing people that do stuff. It's not expensive. So you invest a little bit of money there. Then there's the marketing side of it, right? Business development. How am I going to get people to my website? How am I going to get people through my door? What do people want? Do they even want my product? And nobody ever asked that question. They know what it is. I mean, I made this product. Everybody wants it. It's the greatest thing. Don't be in love with what you made. Figure that out, because you'll open your doors and your best friend will walk in and say, oh, I just saw that at that other store down the street. And you're like, what? So don't be surprised by that. And the 4th thing we already talked about, right? Really knowing your finances, laying out what it's going to cost to run this business. How are you going to go from, being the person running the business to having people working for you? Is it profitable? Do all those things work? And then over time, you can do things. Those will develop into, an employee handbook, a finance guide, a marketing guide, whatever it is. But you got to start, relying on your memory. One of the things I cover in the book is how bad our memories are. Even doctors I have that they just remember everything. They're still not perfect. Our minds don't work that way. So if you're going to rely on just taking it day by day, going in, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm going to do that. It's like, making a list for, you want to invite people to your party, a big family event, and just do it from your head. I guarantee
Someone will get left out.
cousin Jane is going to get left out, and you're going to look like an idiot feeling so bad that you left her out of the party because it just didn't occur to you. It wasn't insulting to Jane. It's just you have 400. So you can't do that. You got to do it in writing. So you have to start doing things in writing. Don't deal with customers or employees or anybody without having it in writing. Don't rely on they're going to think, because it's not like let's assume everybody's well intended. You and I can have business dealings and we'll both have completely different a recall of what our agreement was, unless we have it in writing at the time we both agreed, signed off, and we can go back. And maybe you don't remember it that way. Maybe I don't remember it that way, but it's in writing. Okay, must have been what I agreed to. And you can rely on that. It also takes a lot of pressure off of you to run the business. So that's the first habit, is start putting things in writing. Business plan, contracts, lists, to-dos, ideas, tasks, whatever. Then you can go a little bit more electronic if you want to, like paper or pencil. I use a electronic pad for writing. I don't use paper to make notes. I keep it all it's called a Remarkable, but there's a bunch of them out there. Tablets you write on. And I do that. I have a lot of tasks. I have a lot of automated processes that I use to do the marketing of my practice and different things. So that's like the next stage. But if you start with the right habits, you will see the mistakes that you're making. You'll see things coming down the road. Like, the customers just aren't responding to what you're doing. You need to change this, or, oh my God, our costs are too high. We just, with the pandemic, right? You just found out that your manufacturing costs went up. Well, what are we going to do? Well, if you know your profit margins are X, not too hard to figure out. But if you don't even know what that is, good luck. Like you said before, cash flow hides a lot of things until it stops or drops or whatever. Then you're like, what do you mean we're not making any money? It happened to a lot of people in the pandemic where they were living off of their business, managing day to day, week to week, month to month. Cash flow stops. All of a sudden, everything just comes to a crashing halt. So that's the first thing. Start putting things in writing. Start putting your ideas down and work them through, not in your head.
I like that a lot. And it's so simple and it's so huge. And it's a great reminder because even 5 minutes before we met, I was having like a Monday morning money meeting with my wife, just kind of seeing how the finances are. And like, okay, here's what last week was like, and here's what I'm looking at. And I told her, like, and I had my little spiral bound notebook, and I was like, well, I just want to tell you a few things. I want to give you 3 bullet points, and I want to write them down after I say it. That way I remember what I told you, and that way, like, reality has been solidified, right? That way it's not just all loosey goosey where, as you said, your brain plays tricks on you. And I mean, just writing down such a powerful tool, like when I want to sit down and focus and I'm like, okay, I'm working on this, and I write down like what I'm going to do in the next 5-10 minutes, because if I don't, then things fly in, distractions, putting out fires, people want attention. Next thing you know, you say, wait, what did I even sit down for? I don't even remember. And so that's huge, just writing that down, so that way you know what you're working on. I'm also digesting what you said there about the so basically product, personnel,
Right? Marketing,
money,
finance.
and marketing.
Yeah, those are the 4
Yeah.
areas, right? Because
And that
everything from the business touches one of those 4 areas. So,
And that makes it easy, so that way you're not just, again, playing fast and loose. You say, well, what is lacking? What is my focus?
right.
What is my strength? What can I get someone else to jump in and help out with? And so this is all great to think about. And so you say that you're doing this podcast, you have
Yep.
hundreds of episodes, you have all these cool guests, all this cool information. Is there anything that you think needs more attention, or anything that has surprised you? Like, is there anything like remarkable about this podcast?
I guess the most surprising thing is that it hasn't surprised me. Like my original, I've been practicing law, if I said, for over 30 years. So my original belief about, the things that people don't do to be successful, the difference between the successful people and the unsuccessful people, has pretty much stayed true. So when I meet a business owner, maybe they've exited a couple of businesses, they've started some more, they're also doing some consulting on the side, helping other people, whatever, the attributes that person has, their work ethic, the way that they operate businesses, are very consistent. So, and you find the person who does do things in writing and understands about, leadership and creating an organization with the proper people in place and knowing their finances and numbers and how to grow and how to scale and all that kind of stuff, they can make it in almost any industry. I've had some people on that have bought and sold 5, 6, 7 businesses, completely unrelated industries. Maybe there's some thread of relationship, but not too much. And then you find a lot of people, and this is much more common, obviously, who go into a business because it's an industry they know, it's a product they're familiar with. I don't know, there's some training, whatever, they fall into it. But because they don't figure out the things they need to do to run a business the proper way, they can never make, even if they are successful, they can never make it the next time. Like it's just luck that they figured out the first time. They didn't develop the skills they need to run a new business. And now they're struggling and they're scratching their head thinking, well, I don't understand. I was so successful in this other business and I sold it. And now yeah, but you were working at this company because you knew this industry. You had all these contacts and it was easy, and you had, business development was easy, all this, and then you jumped and you sold, you had money, you bought a new business, and now you're like, what the? And you're trying to figure this stuff out. So that's been the most eye-opening thing, is that it's very easy if you put enough people in the room and you interview enough people, you just see right away. Within 5 minutes, I'll talk to somebody and I'll know this guy's been struggling, this guy's been successful. It's pretty clear, and that's been happening, consistently. I've done 325 episodes, I think. So it's been pretty consistent. So there's no magic to being successful. It's just putting the time in, having the interest, like you said, becoming a student of what it is you're doing. You don't have to go to Harvard for the weekend and take a business seminar up in Boston. There's plenty of stuff to do here, online, in person, all kinds of stuff where you can really become a student of what you're doing, figuring out why people are successful and why other people fail. And I don't know, maybe it's fear to a certain extent. People don't really want to know that they're going to struggle, or, it's like you said, it's just much easier to just put gas in the car and keep driving around. And then, you call your husband when this is what my wife does, when the light comes on the dashboard. I go, well, how long has it been on? I'm not sure. Okay, well, maybe we ought to get
too late, maybe.
Yeah. Right. With the oil example you gave, your engine will be seized and you won't have an engine at that point. So that's common. And we don't have, like, so in college, right, we have deadlines, right? We have a professor, we get a grade. We know we have to, we have these deadlines that are artificially put in place that force us to, do things to get through whatever it is. But that's not true in business. You're all on your own. Nobody's grading you. Nobody's coming in and saying, until you can't pay your bills. I guess that's where the grades come in, right? Where somebody calls me and says, Mitch, I need you to help me shut my business down. And I go, didn't you just open your business like 6 months ago? Yeah, but we didn't anticipate this. Well, what did your business plan say? We didn't write a business plan. There you go. They didn't know the problem, or maybe the problem existed. They should have known before. How many people have you met, Robert, where you really look at their business and you're like, this really shouldn't have been a business, or this person shouldn't have been the one doing this business. They don't have the right skill set for it. Very common. People get, like you say, they fall in love with shiny objects. They don't do the work to find out that that's just a reflection of something else. And it's just not going to make them rich. All these stories you hear about really successful entrepreneurs, we both know it's a very small percentage of the overall population. And I'm not talking Jeff Bezos. I mean, I'm talking, successful, but not like, putting rockets on the moon. You can still be very successful. There's plenty of guys out there that are, but it's still a small group. It's still a very small, it's probably 20% of the 20%. So,
but as you said, it is achievable as long as we do the right things.
Right.
And that requires having some of this self-awareness, and don't just jump ship and get into entrepreneurship because it's emotion based, or because it's exciting, or something made you mad, or you say, I'm such a good McDonald's employee, I'll just start my own McDonald's. And then there's that 80-20 in place, where probably the workness of it, like your work skills and your employee effort, that will probably be 20%, and there's 80% of these 4 attributes that we mentioned, right? The product and the people and the marketing and the finances. There's all these other skills that we need to develop, and things that we need to maybe know just enough to hire someone else to do it. And you mentioned about changing habits, and when you think of habits, you think of like the momentum, right? There's what the habits that you've been doing so far, but then to kind of change some of those things might take a little bit of work. It won't be instant, or it will take some patience. And then it seems like a really helpful thing because people should read your book and they should listen to your podcast. And I think a helpful perspective for a listener of your podcast should be to look at those attributes of your guests and say, like, okay, are they of the type that are struggling and haven't made it, or the type that have made it? And if they are these successful people, then say, okay, well, what do they do well? What are their values? What's important to them? And that's what things like Think and Grow Rich are all about, right?
Yep,
Like there's
absolutely.
the successful group, and what do they do? And how can we notice it? And how can we apply it to ourselves? And it sounds simple on the surface, but it requires this kind of deliberate effort. And so with your book or your podcast or your teachings, is there a list, or have you thought about like this list of like things to do properly to avoid being a statistic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I probably should do a coffee table book, lessons from my top 100 guests or something.
Yeah,
I don't have
sounds
a list
great.
anywhere. I mean, except if the book gives you 10 things that you should do to be successful, to avoid confrontation and misunderstandings in business, whether it's with partners or customers or clients. That's often things that derail what you're doing. But I would say, no, I don't really have a list. If you go by my 4-part business plan, which we mentioned, the 4 areas, and you go with the 10 items in the book, you'll be pretty good. And then if it's good thing, and not just my podcast, but if you listen to podcasts with successful people, you can find big ones like How I Built This with Guy Raz, and all the ones. Business Wars is a great one. Pay attention to the things that people did to be successful. Where did they struggle? Where did they fail? Where did they trip up? Because you always learn more that way anyway. And you'll start to see the attributes. The guys that are the people that are successful, generally what happens is they end up being the captain of the ship at some point, right? They're not sweeping the floors anymore. They're not fixing the curtains. They're not taking the garbage out. They start to build an organization behind them of people that are good at what they do, understand what the vision is, or buy into the vision, or whatever the unique selling proposition of the company is. And they do that on a regular basis. So that's why they're successful in other industries, because you're finding the right people to work this particular business, and you're just the guy at the top of the food chain that says, okay, Robert, how is it coming over in this department, and what's going on here, and I want you two to collaborate, and we're going to bring in this. And you become more of a coordinator and a facilitator, which is not a bad thing. Like, it's okay to give up some control of your business. That's how you are successful, is by being more of a an outside guy than an inside person, right? The person who can work on their business. We always hear this term, right? Versus work in their business. Because if you work in the business, then you're just another employee. You also happen to own the company. So what, right? So you really have to do that. And that's the ones that are successful. The people that move to that level, that learn about, okay, if I scale this business, I can't do it sweeping the floors myself. I have to start bringing people in, even if it's 1 or 2 to start, grow from there, focus on business development, which is what you probably should do, right? You should be the one bringing the business in the door, as far as I'm concerned. And then those things will start to work, all those different parts about it, I always say to people, if you had the best, what's the word? The best kind of vision in your mind of how well your business can run, like the marketing's going well, you're posting on the internet, you're putting ads in, you're running seminars, whatever it is. If it was all happening properly at the same time, would you think it would work? And if the answer is, oh my God, there would be business coming in the door, hanging out the windows, we would try to keep up with this, it would be impossible, then maybe you're on the right road. It's just a question of figuring out how to get there. Maybe you got to bootstrap for a while, and you got to put in extra hours or whatever. But, the entrepreneur is not the kid who starts the social network and doesn't sleep for 4 weeks, programming all night. I mean, that stuff exists, but it just, things have to be sustainable. You can't always work to the bone, because then you're going to get to be, like you said, 60, 65, 70 years old. What are you going to do? You're just going to keep working hard until you drop dead? So you have to
Some
build
people
that
do.
system. Yeah. And look, 2 generations ago, that was okay, right? You'd work hard. You got to 65, you're retired. Now it's time to get your pension and you can live. But that doesn't happen anymore. So if you don't build an infrastructure around you and your business, it's not going to be able to help you. Right now, you're helping it. So it's not going to be able to help you unless you build it up that way. And that's the way you do it, right? To learn to slowly rise to the top, overview of everything that you're doing, get the right people in place, and keep building that system. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. They're pretty much the same.
I love it. Well, it's time to flip the script, and
Yeah.
I like your this life lesson of being more of a people person. That way you can delegate, and that way you put your generals in place,
Yeah.
so that way things get run. And this was a lesson lost on me when I was a teenager. Right when I was a teenager, I thought like, oh, I'm such a smart person. I don't need people skills. I was even proud of not being a people person, and I thought like, okay, well, I'll just put my genius in place and figure out a process. And
Right.
in the young adult years I was turning away business, but after a while you realize, well, hey, to have something that's sustainable, you need this infrastructure in place. You need to be prepared. You need to deal with your problems before they become problems, all these important kind of things. And the place for us to get dialed in to this better way of thinking, to get out of panic mode, to grow a business, as you said, that helps us instead of us helping it,
Right.
right, have it go the correct direction. We need to check out your book, which is called 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, the Small Business Owner's Guide to Staying Out of Court.
Yeah.
And then your podcast, what's the name of that and how do we find that?
It's called The Accidental Entrepreneur. You can find it on, Amazon, Spotify, uh, um, Apple Music. I mean, any of the podcast directories. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can watch. I use the same studio you use to record, so you can find me interviewing people on our YouTube channel. That goes back to sometime during the pandemic, because before then I was doing things in person. It was just audio. So, but if you go back there, and so most of them are on video, and yeah, it's a good way. So subscribe. We release new episodes every Friday. And we've been pretty consistent. I took one break, I think, this summer, but for the most part, we'll put out reruns, things like that. But for the most part, we've had about 325 episodes. And if anybody has, have a good story to tell, they can submit a guest request, and we'll see if we think it's something valuable for our listeners. And the book, by the way, it's available on Amazon, soft cover, and Kindle. I guess you can get it on Kindle. And we're just in the middle of recording the audible version, so that should be out, I'm hoping, in a couple of months. We're almost finished recording. I don't know how long it takes to get on their directory, but we'll see.
Well, exciting, and I'm excited for you. So that is 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, the Accidental Entrepreneur podcast. And then do you feel like plugging your website or any other calls to action?
Yeah, my website. So I have two websites. One is my law firm. So beinhakerlaw.com is the law firm. And the podcast and some ebooks, including the 10 Ways book, is on mitchbeinhaker.com. That's where I'll probably put, a link to this video we'll put on there, because I'm speaking on your show and stuff like that. That's the mitchbeinhaker.com website, beinhakerlaw.com for the legal side of it.
Okay, and then to spell that out also, since it's a podcast, we never know if someone's video or audio. That's BEINHAKER, MitchBeinhaker.com and BeinhakerLaw.com. And so as people go there, either the Mitch Beinhaker site or the law firm or the book or the podcast, do you have any final parting words of advice? We love the sound bites, the quotes, the lessons. So what comes to mind as far as a quote or lesson?
Yeah, I mean, put things in writing. Know your numbers. Know your clients. The most successful people I work with, they are constantly asking their clients, their customers, what they want. They don't believe themselves like they know it. And it does change over time. So, know your customers, know your numbers, put things in writing. Those are like the three things that people should take from our discussion, I think.
Wonderful. Put that on a sign or on a t-shirt or something. And so let's think about that as we check out the Accidental Entrepreneur podcast. Mitch Beinhaker, wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks, Robert.